Lads, so we are here with Amy O Donoghue. Thank you very much, Amy, for taking the time to come onto the podcast. Again, as I always say, I don't really like making it a thing, but I love having more women on the podcast because it's diverse and you get to see, two sides of the sport. So, no, it is really great to have you on.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. And yeah, I'm sure I'll have loads of wisdom and loads of knowledge. So have a great chat.
Hopefully. So, yeah, just for the listeners at home, if you want to give a bit of a background about yourself, just to kick things off.
Yeah, so my name is Amy O Donoghue and I'm from Limerick. I'm actually currently living in Dublin now at the moment. I just moved up for training and stuff. So I'm a middle distance runner. I run 800, 1500, and I also run cross country. I'm the current national senior 1500-meter champion, and I did primary school teaching as my degree. So yeah, I've been running since I was in first year of secondary school. So I suppose it's kind of like it's not early to running, but it's also not late either. So yeah, that's me.
Perfect. Yeah, no, same as me. Obviously, I don't want to put myself in the same maybe caliber at the moment, but no, yeah, no, that's the same as me. I feel like first year is kind of when the proper training starts. In a way, you're about 12, 13. I feel like just before that, from what I was seeing with like some of the younger teams within my club, anyway, it's kind of just to kind of enjoy it, few games here and there. But then when you get into the age of 12, 13, and you get into secondary school is when the actual training starts happening. So yeah, I don't think it's too late at all. And no, I think it's quite a decent enough time to get into it. So obviously everyone had to start from somewhere, and being obviously Irish yourself, was there any other sports you were involved in, maybe Gaelic, camogie, soccer, when growing up, or did you just, the first sport you've ever jumped into was running and you just caught onto it straight away?
So I was actually an Irish dancer before I started running, and I did it at the highest level you could do in primary school. And it's funny because I feel like Irish dancing is just this whole other world, and it's really intense. So I think it was really beneficial for me when I started running because it's very like an individual sport, and it's high level pressure. Like you go to worlds and you go to like major championships. Like I would have gone to America a good few times for like the major championship. It's called the North Americans. I've been to the Worlds, All Ireland, so it's quite similar to running in the sense that like you're training really hard. And I used to travel from Limerick to Cork for lessons. So I was up and down to Cork 3 times a week. So it was fairly intense for being in primary school, I suppose. But I suppose it really helped me then getting into running.
No, definitely. And would you say, like, from what I've seen of Irish dancing in a way, it's definitely a very physically demanding sport like running. So would you say that really helped you with your starting running to have that kind of, endurance kind of basis for going into running?
Yeah, definitely. Like even my PE teacher who got me into running was like, "Okay, you're an Irish dancer, so you'll be fit," and I was, and like I suppose I never would have even thought about middle distance running until that. But yeah, I think like it's all plyometrics, Irish dancing. It's all jumps, and you have to be really fit and really strong. So yeah, I think it helped massively getting into running. Then you have like the mental side of it as well. So it's very, it's intense, and you're memorizing the steps, and then you're in like a high pressure competition, and like there's a lot on the line. Say in Munsters you're trying to qualify for the World Championships. So yeah, I think it helped. Like even with the pressure and stuff from running, I think it helped a lot.
Definitely, definitely, and no, we can definitely see that within kind of your early on success within running. When we were talking on off air over on Instagram, you mentioned to me that you kind of accidentally, started into running. Do you want to kind of give a bit more of a background into that?
Yeah, so basically, I was in first year in school, and my PE teacher was just telling us that there was like a competition called the North Munsters on. And sure, like me and my friends were like, "Oh my god, a day off school! That's unreal. We'll go to that." So we did. I literally rocked up in like basketball shorts and like Nike TNs. Like I hadn't a notion. Like I didn't even know how many laps the 800 was. And then I was like to my friends, "Oh, like how many laps?" I was like, I was on the start line, and I was like, how many laps is this? And then I ended up winning, and I beat people who actually trained in athletics and were like 800-meter runners. So I was like, ooh, I kind of like this. And then that's how I got into it. And my cousin, Anamara, she coaches in Emerald AC, which was the club in Limerick, and she started coaching me, and yeah, that's how I started. So that was, I think the North Munsters was in like May, and then I won my first All Ireland that summer. So yeah, it was great. Like it was really really good to get into it.
That's no, that's insane. To say least, say the least, winning your first All Ireland that summer. What was that? Did you kind of, at the time, you were really new to running, so did you kind of have an idea of how good that actually was, and where that could kind of take you, or were you just kind of there like, all right, I won this, like not too big of a deal. We'll just carry on. So what was your kind of mindset like in a way?
No, I knew, like, I think once I started and I started winning, I had that mentality where I was like, okay, I want to win all these races. And also, like, at the time, like, Sarah Lavin, she's an Irish senior hurdler, like, Liliana O'Hora, also an Irish senior hurdler. Like, we were all really close and, like, we still are, but I was surrounded by them, watching them win All Irelands. And so it was just kind of second nature to me. Like, when I was watching all the other girls win, and even our relay in Emerald, we used to win the All Irelands and that. So then I just kind of expected that for myself. But like I knew, like when I won that first All Ireland, I knew how much of a big deal it was. Like I don't think like maybe my mom didn't know. She was like, she thought it was the heat. She was like, did you win the heat? Like, and I was like, no, that was the final. But I knew like, okay, this is a big deal, and like this is great to be starting off winning. But I think I really liked it, and I knew that I was talented at it and even from the Irish dancing, I knew I had like a good start into the sport. So yeah, no, I did really enjoy it.
Yeah, definitely. And kind of going back to the Irish dancing thing again, as we were mentioning at the start, starting off a first year when, people aren't fully committed to running and training, kind of you having that commitment and that kind of maybe even mental strength and determination within Irish dancing even before getting into running definitely would have given you that edge over people that may have been in the sport 3 4 years earlier, but just because you were in that kind of intense athletics environment before you even got into running, definitely helped you. And we see that as well when you mentioned to me earlier on that you also got the double in your first schools as a junior. So kind of what was that all about? Was that in on the track in the 800 and the 1500?
Yeah, that was, yeah. So there actually wasn't a minor back then. It was 2008. Yeah. Oh my God, I'm so old. Um, but yeah, so it was 2008, and I knew like Katie Kirk, who actually is still running now, and Isolt O'Donnell, who are there also all still running now. I knew I'd heard of the girls, and I suppose like I guess because I had won the clubs, I had no like fear, like when you're young and you haven't been through any injuries or any setbacks. I had no fear. I knew that it would be really really tight. And it was raining as well, I remember. But yeah, so I won the 800 and I was delighted. And then I won the 1500 as well. And I knew actually winning that double was like a really big deal. But I also knew going to the competition that I wanted to win the double. And yeah, I definitely think like having that mentality from Irish dancing stood to me, where it was like I was used to performing under pressure from age 5. So even though I still obviously get nervous, I was used to it and I knew how to kind of control it from a younger age, I suppose.
Yeah, no, definitely. That's that especially early on in your career. That's still, no matter what age you are, because you can only really race who's on the line with you. That's definitely still a really really big achievement. And kind of on the topic of really big achievements, 2 years later in 2010, following that up with schools 800 and 1500 meter double, but also not forgetting breaking the Irish 800 meter record, obviously for your age. So kind of did that definitely have a different feel to it than just compared to, obviously, because you did do the double before, so kind of had a bit of an idea what that kind of victory tasted like, but then breaking a record, and obviously you're telling me that record stood for 20 years prior, so did that kind of have a different feel to it?
It did. And like I think 2010 was a really, really good year for me. I was really confident. Like I remember going to that competition, like the schools that year, and I was there to win. There was no question about it. I knew I was in really good shape. And I remember Emma Mitchell, we like nearly crossed the line together in the 1500. She had done the 1500 and 3K. So she wanted that double. And I did the 800 and 1500. And of course, I wanted the double. The 1500 was both of our second events. So she had won the 3K that day. I had won the 800. And it was like a big head to head in the 1500. And like, I feel like I really thrived off that. And it was like, I knew it would be a brilliant race. And I suppose it went so well, and it was like a really sunny day. But I just remember that day, even still, like, I mean, it was what, 11 years ago, and I remember like so well. I was just so confident going into it, and I had such belief in myself. And I think like that it's on those days where your self belief is really high that you perform to your best. And I did, because like, you always have the days where you mightn't feel great, or you might be like, oh, training didn't go well, or I'm just not really feeling it today. But luckily, like, everything clicked on that day, and yeah, like, just to break the record was brilliant. So yeah, it was a great day. Still one of my favorite days, like, in
Definitely.
athletics.
Yeah, no, 100%. In terms of breaking the record, what time did you run that day?
I ran 2:10, and I think the record was 2:11.
Jeez, so
Which back then that was a good time. I feel like now it's like, oh, that's not great, but when I was intermediate, like, it would have been a fairly solid time, 2:10.
no, definitely. That's and even a second. People may be thinking you maybe aren't as familiar with sport, especially over the 800-meter distance. It's such a hard event, and especially coming down the final straight, the legs to be filling up mad with the lactic. So
Yeah.
so to break an 800-meter record by 1 second is definitely an achievement in itself. So no, that's really really cool. Kind of now maybe coming into a bit more of a negative side maybe, but I feel like it's a really good topic to touch on in terms of, you yourself, especially in Ireland, are quite a high caliber and talented athlete. So for people maybe who look up to you, or just to kind of get a refresher on that, everyone does go through injuries in a way, and it's definitely you can definitely come out with them at the end of it and still achieve really really amazing things. So you're telling me that from the start of 2011 to 2014, it was kind of up and down in terms of injury, and then obviously you had to end up getting surgery on your foot. So kind of taking it back all the way to 2014, when maybe the first injury kicked in. What was it, and kind of how did you go about it?
Yeah, so in 2011, like, I just had a great year in 2010, and then the start of 2011, I won the national cross country championships under 17, I think it was, and everything was going to plan. And the European Youth Olympics, EYOF, that was on that summer, and my main aim for the summer was to go to that, to qualify in the 800. So I suppose it kind of started like in maybe April or May. I started getting this pain in my foot, and like, anyone who is watching out there that is around that age, I think I was 16 or 17, I can't remember. 17, sorry, I was 17 that year. I ignored it, because all I wanted to do was go to Turkey. I wanted to go to the Europeans, and the pain got worse and worse. And I used to write down in my training diary, like, when it was sore. And I think I actually remember going back through my training diary, and there was like 40 track sessions
Holy,
or 40 sessions that I could actually remember being like, oh, I shouldn't be running on this, like, but I kept running through it anyway, until eventually I literally was limping. And like, I got the qualifying time, I went to the Europeans, and I collapsed over the line. A mix of heat stroke and the injury, like, I could barely walk, like. And I mean, looking back now, I obviously should never have went, but at the time, that's all I wanted to do. So it was a stress fracture and a stress reaction in my navicular. So that was the first injury. So was in the boot, the big black boot that you
yeah.
have to wear, like, when you have bone injury. So I went into that, and I was in fifth year in secondary school, just going into sixth year, sorry. So literally spent all of sixth year in and out of the boot. Like, October time, I was kind of getting back into running, got the same injury again. So this injury was just recurring. It just wasn't healing, and we couldn't really get to the bottom of it. So I eventually, anyway, got a scholarship to go to America, and everything was going pretty well. I wasn't really running great, but I went over in August. So this is August 2012. I had gone over. I was still kind of coming back from the first stress reaction. Never really got back to where I had been. And then I got told over there I was after getting another stress reaction in my navicular and a stress fracture in one of my metatarsals. So back into the boot in America, and like I was already homesick and I was just not enjoying it. And then I was after getting landed with this bone injury again. So that was like my third or fourth time having that same injury. And then eventually, when I came home after I spent the whole year in America, I ran, so my PB going over there for the 800 would have been 209. I think I ran 216 once, and that was the only time I raced. Like
Yeah.
it was just not ideal, and it's really upsetting because I knew that I had such a good schools career, and I was kind of like it just expected it to kind of roll through into college, and it couldn't have been any different. So there was a lot of lows definitely over from 2011 to 2014. But in 2013, anyway, I ended up getting surgery, keyhole surgery on my foot. And that kind of, I found out when I was back in Ireland that I had a bone spur that was the cause of this injury. So definitely, even anyone out there who is getting like the same injury over and over and over, just make sure to get another opinion, because there's often another problem that is the cause of all this. And like I didn't find that out. Like I spent 2011 to 2013 trying to find that out. So eventually found that out. And then 2014, it was the consistency. I started getting back in, because from 2011 it was like run, injury, run, injury, run, injury. So I wasn't fit because I wasn't getting the back-to-back blocks of training. So then in 2013, 2014, I got a bit of consistency back, and slowly but surely then I started to kind of find my feet again. But it was hard, like, and I feel like when you're young, you might look at the older athletes and think, oh my God, like they have it all figured out, or like everything seems to be great for them. But like those few years were really, really tough for me. So
Yeah, definitely. And we can sit here all day and talk about kind of the pain that and the surgery and whatnot. Obviously, I'm not nowhere near qualified within that background, but what we can talk about in a way that I feel like could really help people out there that could be going through an injury, or that could possibly go through an injury in the future, is kind of mentally how you can get through the time. So when it first happened, you were telling us that all you were thinking about were the European Youth Olympics. So that kind of in a way take your mind off the pain, and then after that, when maybe you didn't do so well, then did it maybe kick in that, oh wait, like things kind of start going downhill?
yeah, so I think I was just putting the foot out of my head. I just kept putting it off because I just wanted to make that international. And then, yeah, I think it really hit me when I collapsed over the line at that race. And then it was like reality, like, okay, there's something wrong here with your foot. This isn't going away. Cause I think you kind of hope like, oh, it might magically go away, or it might just stop hurting. But eventually it gets to a point where you're like, okay, this isn't going away, and I have to actually address this issue now. And it's funny because I think looking back now, like the one thing that I would say to younger athletes is, you think at that time that that's the most important competition and that there's nothing else gonna ever come along.
Yeah.
But like the truth is, like I'm 27 now and I still think I have so much further to go. And like I honestly think looking back that that period of time that I brought on myself took a good few years out of my career, and I could definitely be at a higher level now than I am. But because I didn't listen to my body, I ended up having 3 years where I was just pissing about and I was injured and not injured. And I think if it's one thing I could tell my younger self, it's like, listen to your body. Like that, there'll always be another race, there'll always be another international. And if you're injured, you need to stop. You just need to stop running, because it just will lead to further issues down the line.
Yeah, definitely. No, that's really good advice, and in a way it's kind of simple, but then when you're in the moment and you can't train, you kind of put it to the back of your mind. So no, kind of that refresher is obviously really really great to hear. In terms, when you weren't able to run during those periods where you were telling us that you weren't getting the consistent training in, you weren't you weren't fit due to the fact that you weren't getting those blocks in. You were on and off, on and off. During those off periods, were you kind of, just completely out? Were you doing some sort of cross training, or were you kind of, in a way, like, I know it's kind of cliche in a way, but you always hear people, and especially when they pick up injuries, they kind of try and find themselves outside of running or outside of any sport or anything that they're doing, and kind of become more than a runner. Were you kind of ever in that kind of mindset? You were like, right, yeah, I can't run, but I can still do many other things, or were you kind of just always thinking running, running, running?
No, and I think like even from when I started running, I never had that like that mentality that was like so running, running, running and just like blinkers on. Like I always had a really good balance, and I always knew that I always said to myself like there's more to life than running, and there is, and I think that's so important as well because like I've seen it through the years. I've seen the people who take it way too serious too soon and just put all their attention on running. Like when they get injured, then it's like you lose your whole identity. Whereas I don't think I ever had that problem because running was never my whole identity. I did things like aqua jogging, but I also had other hobbies like music, like dancing. Where I couldn't dance either, but like I still would have gone, but like still gone to the lessons and stuff. And because I danced until I was 16, I like Irish dancing. And I just made sure not to like close off from everyone because it's so easy when you're injured and when you're pissed off to just you want to be by yourself. But I think like just like staying in touch with my friends, always going out with my friends, and like I suppose when you are injured, you do have an opportunity to socialize a bit more because when you're in season, you are that bit more focused. So I definitely probably went out a bit more, went like meeting up with my friends a bit more. But I always, even when I was like when I'm really fit and healthy, always have that balance. Like yeah, running is there, and I love running, and I really dedicate myself to running. But like, there's always more to life than running at the same time.
Yeah, 100%. That's really good to hear, especially from in Ireland and top level athletes. It's always good to know if not everything has to be running, 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 running. I know some people might be looking at the Europeans, looking at the World Championships, or looking at the Olympics, thinking like all these athletes do and all these athletes think about is running. But then hearing it from an athlete like yourself, it's refreshing again in a way to hear that you can have an identity outside of running, and especially when things aren't going well in running, to not bring them into kind of your social life and
Yeah.
family life and life of friends, and to kind of separate them two in a way. It's really good to hear.
Yeah. It can be hard though to separate them as well because when you do put so much time and effort into running, it's so hard to separate them. But I think it's the best thing you'll do, and doing it from that young age as well, you'll never get into that kind of like zone where it's like running is my whole life because I just don't think it's healthy. I think you need to have a balance, and you need to remember that there is more to life than running because then when you do get injured or when bad things happen or like the race doesn't go to plan, then you're not like hyper focused on it, and okay, well now there's more. I can go out with my friends, I can do this hobby, I can do that hobby. So yeah, it's really healthy to have a good balance.
Definitely, 100%. I couldn't agree more. But yeah, kind of coming back into a more positive side of things when we'll get more maybe into America in a moment. But after the surgery and after you realize that the problem could have been elsewhere in your body, and you really need to start listening to your body, and when everything kind of started to click together in a way, and you were able to start getting back to running in a way. And what was that kind of transition from being injured and slowly getting back into running, like? Was it more of a way like you were really unfit, and it was kind of really messing you up mentally, thinking I'm never gonna get back to where I was? Or were you more on the side of I can start running back now, and that's a good thing, and we can just work with the fitness that we have at the moment, and not kind of set our eyes on any races really, and just try to get back as fit as possible?
Yeah, so I mean, even for me, like I had put on weight, I was unfit. Um, and I probably wasn't happy, but I never really put pressure on myself, and we really were patient. And that's the one thing you have to be is after an injury, you have to be patient because once you get back running and things are going well, you think like, oh well, this race is coming up, and maybe I could do this race, and then you might try to like rush back into things, whereas like there's just no rushing. I never rushed, and like even sometimes if things weren't going to plan, we would just change the plan. Like if maybe I had a race planned, but I wasn't really feeling it, or I just wasn't fit enough, or I just was like, you know what, I'm not confident enough to race yet. We'd just push it down the line. But I think like definitely the mental side of things was hard. But to be honest, it was like small little wins is what actually got me there. Like it wasn't like this one moment where I was like, oh my God, brilliant. Now I'm running well again. It was like, oh, like that was a really good session. I actually feel really confident now after doing that. And then you would bring that into the next week and then the next one and the next one and you'd build. But like it's so tedious and it's so like time consuming. And sometimes you might take 2 steps forward and then have a shit week and then you think the world is ending, but in reality, like it's just normal to have those weeks and those down times as well. But yeah, like it was definitely a process. It definitely took a lot of time and a lot of patience, but if you just like hang in there, then the results will come eventually.
Yeah, 100%. And I really like what you said there in a way where it was like you had if you had one good session, you wouldn't have a complete shift in mindset in a way that it was like, right, I'm fit, I can do anything now, sign me up for a race, put me in the biggest session. You're kind of just like, right, that was good, and you use that momentum and that confidence in the next session or in the next run to help you then. So that's good to hear that it was kind of like, I know everyone when they're injured, and I'd say you were as well. When you wanted to just get back, and that's just natural. But it was
Mm.
kind of, you could say, like a mature way or a professional way to think about it, to be like, no, I don't want to get injured again, so we take it slow and just kind of carry that momentum on. So that's really good to hear.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it is. And that's the thing. Like, it's just patience. And as runners, I think we are the most impatient people ever. We want all the results. We want to see it now, now, now. But I think that's one thing I've learned is that, like, you just have to be so patient with it because the results will come, but it just might take a little more time. And it rarely ever goes to plan. Like, you think, okay, I'll run this time here, I'll run this time here, when there's normally about 10 ups and downs, a few tears, a few smiles, and then it might finally happen.
Definitely, yeah. And in terms of, when your fitness did come back and when you did start thinking again, because obviously we can talk about taking it slow and all, but at the end of the day, you do want to get back running and you do want to get back racing, you do want to get back fit. So when did it kind of click with you? Was it a race? Was it a session when you were kind of like, right? I'm kind of back now, and we can start really, really building from here. So when did that kind of happen, or when did that kind of click with you?
So in 2010, when I won that double in the schools, I ran two PBs that day as well. So my 1500 PB was 4:33, right?
Yeah.
And then in 2014, it was still 4:33. So that was 4 years of no PBs, barely raced. And then I opened my season with a 4:32, and I just needed to break that 4:33. And then that was the first moment I was like, oh my God, I ran a PB. It might be a big one, but I still ran one, so that was like a little win. And then the next race, I ran 4:32 in my first race, and then in the next race I ran 4:30, and then in the next race I had a big jump. I ran 4:24. So it was just little things, and I was getting more confident. And then sure, when I ran the 4:24, I knew that's where I should have been, but I was absolutely delighted. So I think it was like starting off the 2014 season, thinking like, okay, I've had this PB since 2010. I've had the injury problems. Like, I know now I'm ready for this. And it was just, I had the year of consistent training behind me, and I was ready to go. And it had been 4 years. Like, I was like, I need to get going here. I need to run a PB. And it was just with each race, I got a little more confident. And then when I had the big jump, I really got a lot of confidence back from that then.
Yeah, what I really took out of that there was, when you mentioned the little wins. You can, even during these times with COVID as well, when there's no races, and maybe your coach is sending you a few time trials and that, but even like when you have a good run or a good session, or you're just feeling better than you would after a run on a different day, then it's always good to get them little wins that really do help you mentally, and especially when you're talking there after an injury. it's really good to not kind of think everyone has a big goal, and that big goal will always be with you no matter if you're injured or if you're fit. But especially during times when you're injured, it's good to get them little goals and be like, right. And as you mentioned before, carrying that momentum on with you into the next race or into the next session, and kind of be like, right, so I got a 1 second PB, maybe next race I go out prepare and get another second off in my new PB. So no, the little wins. I think that was a really good idea.
Hmm. Yeah, and even now, like, as you were saying there with COVID, like I didn't do after the indoors, like the little mini season that we had. I didn't do sessions for about 4 weeks, and then 2 weeks ago, I was doing a session 6 by 1K, and it was my first session in a while, but like I mentally found it so tough. It was the toughest session I'd done in so long, and I wanted to drop out, and my brain was like, stop, stop, stop. But I dug so deep in that session just to keep going. I was like, no, because I'm going to keep going. And it was, even though it was like such a small thing, to me that was such a big win. And then I was able to carry that. I was like, look, I did that now. That's my first hurdle. And then I brought that into the next week, and which was last week, and then the session went even better. So it's just like there's always going to be a moment where you either are like, oh god, I want to give up, or no, I have to dig deep here. And it's those moments that are the ones that actually help you progress and move on and move on. Like it's not the runs where you're like, oh, that went great, like that was really good. It's the ones where you're in that pain and you're like, okay, I have to dig so deep here. Like they're the ones that make you realize, okay, you know what, like I can push on and I'm doing really well.
Yeah, no, 100%. That's really really great to hear. And as I mentioned, we'd come back to America a little later on, and I'd kind of like to jump into that a little bit more because you know I feel like when people hear, oh, you get a scholarship to America, they think you're gonna go over, live the luxury life, and basically become a beast, and come back and kind of rule over here in a way. But that's definitely not the case, and obviously, you got extremely unlucky, but. In a sense, I feel like people kind of think like you get injury over there, you get an injury over there, but you'll have top physios, top doctors, top coaches, and you'll be fine. But from you're kind of a first hand source here in a way to show that that's definitely not true. So to kind of just start things off, like we're talking about your early success and just your overall success really during your school. So is that kind of how the scholarship came about, or kind of what was that whole process like for you?
Yeah, that's if, from my school's career, I suppose, is how it came about. And Frank O'Mara, my cousin, had actually been to Arkansas, and been extremely successful. He won the World Indoors twice. He went to the Olympics at least 2 times. I'm pretty sure 3 times. He was phenomenal, and of course that was the draw to Arkansas. Um, so yeah, I mean, I was definitely coming from, I was a big fish in a small pond. And you go over there and I was 18, I was coming back from an injury, and I was in college all of a sudden with Olympians,
Yeah.
um, not even like a small step up in level. This was like this was like a professional setup. So yeah, it just the training didn't suit me. The surface didn't suit me. I know some people go there and have like unreal experience, but it just unfortunately, and you hear about the people that don't have such a good experience, and like that was me. So I think I was definitely homesick. First of all, I wasn't used to being away from home, and I know people are like, because a lot of people were like, oh, like just give it more time, just give it more time, but I was like, I think like deep down, I knew deep down in my gut, I was like, this just doesn't, it's not for me. Like it just doesn't feel right here. And I tried to kind of ignore that. And then it's a really high intensity environment. You've gone from being like really good friends with all the runners in Ireland to like now your friends are also your competitors. And that can get bitchy sometimes, and it's tough. It's a lot of girls, it's a lot of high pressure, and you go from running for like fun to it's business almost now, because your points count and everything's about the team, and it's all team, and It's very different. And when you're in a school like Arkansas, like, I mean, they're one of the best in America, and the talent and the amount of athletes over there that are running fast, it's just incredible. And it's a place where if you're injury prone, it's not great because it's business, and they need to keep pushing, they need to keep going, and they need to give the top athletes, and they need to give the athletes who are racing, all of their attention. So it was tough, like, and I knew deep down that just it wasn't whatever was going on with my foot, like it wasn't being resolved. Like the issue was not being resolved because it just kept coming back and it wasn't healing properly. So that I was really happy to get home to Ireland and get like proper care, and it just suited me better in Ireland. But like, I mean, I put on weight, which was something I had never dealt with as a runner. And that was really hard to shake that off. And to the outside world, it mightn't have been much, but I was overweight for my running weight. And I was eating shit over there. Like I know, like if you've ever been to America, like the food is ridiculous. Like,
Yeah.
and sure, I was having like where we were for in the dining hall, you could have pizza for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So I great. Like
Definitely.
I thought I could get away with everything, and then slowly but surely I began to learn. Okay, no, that's not how this works.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of tears and a lot of maybe like pretending I was having fun. Like I remember when I came home, people were like, "Oh, what? But your pictures look like you were having so much fun," and I was like, "Yeah, they're only pictures." Like I know it's all doom and gloom, but like I am so happy I went and got to experience it. Like I had some great times, of course. I met some amazing people, but if it was just clouded because I did go through the injury, and it was quite tough. It was a tough experience. But just to see the way they train over there, and the competition, the standard of competition is insane. Like I think for someone like me, it would have been a lot better for me to go as a master's. I just wasn't mature enough, and I didn't have the mileage or the experience under my legs. So I mean, if people like that are young, don't forget, like there's also the option to go for a master's. And I think it could suit a lot more people because you're that bit older, you're that bit stronger, and you've that much more experience under you. Whereas when I was 18, I was after losing a bit of my confidence anyway because I had been injured. And then that wasn't the best way to start off when you're in with the top girls in America. So I feel like I was always just behind. When I went over, I was behind because I was coming back from injury, and then I was behind when I was struggling with the intensity of the training, and then I was behind when I got injured. So it was just a lot of playing catch up, and then then my body broke down again.
Yeah,
So
no, definitely. And what you mentioned there, the fact that over here you're kind of like a big fish in a small pond, but then over there it's like a different kettle of fish altogether. And it's just as well, the amount of people over in America, the population size, you're gonna have a lot more people and a lot more talented athletes. But as we were mentioning at the start of the episode, the fact that you were never kind of you know, during your first injury and during kind of your whole life of running, you were never kind of just running, running, running. You took time to get friends, go out, socialize, spend time with family and all that. But did you feel like over there? I know you're there on a scholarship and you're there to perform, but do you think maybe for you personally it was a bit too much running, 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 and then the fact that you were coming back from injury, you picked up an injury over there. Do you feel like that kind of, pressure on running that maybe you never dealt with before kind of ended up getting to you?
yeah, I'd say so because it's definitely a high pressure environment, and it's really frowned upon to not really frowned upon, but like you're not supposed to be going out socializing. You're there for a job, and running, I would say it's almost like a job. When you're a collegiate athlete, it's a real insight into the life of a professional runner, and I was not ready for that at 18. I was ready to go out and go do this and go to frat parties, and like the two don't you can't do both.
No.
And
Yeah.
I learned that. But that's what I think it did get to me. But I think it's because I wasn't mature enough, and I was kind of ready to explore and do this and do that, and like I wasn't ready for that like full-time running commitment. And it's a shock to the system when you realize, oh, okay, like I'm really just here to run and not really mingle. And you're surrounded by runners, and that's another thing, like when you're injured over there, you live with runners, you're surrounded by runners, the athletes are your friends. So it makes it even that little bit harder, because when you're in Ireland and you're injured, you have your friends from school, or you just have your non-running friends, and they don't really know much about running or care, so it's not what you're talking about. But when you're over there and you're going through a tough time with running, and you're surrounded with the runners who you train with and compete against, like, it does make it that little bit tougher.
Yeah, definitely. Like I know myself. If I'm going out with my friends who have no idea about anything to do with running, it's good because it kind of takes you away from, if you had a bad run or a bad session that day, it kind of takes your mind off it, and you just get to enjoy it. But then I feel like being surrounded by it 24/7, it kind of, yeah, it definitely would get to you. And especially if things aren't going well for you, it can definitely damage your mental health. And as well, being so far from home, it's not the same where kind of if you have a bad race, you come home and you have your mom kind of comforting you, you know
Yeah.
giving you everything you need. You go back to your dorm. And not to kind of, put bad on going over to America on a scholarship, because obviously it's an amazing opportunity, but it as well, there's pros and cons to everything. And that
Yeah.
definitely could be a big con for some people going over to America. And especially
Yeah.
like you were mentioning, and I'd say you definitely had a big, support group back here over in Ireland, with coaches, family members, and people there for you. But then, it's not kind of the same over in America. This is just me now presuming in a way, because obviously I've never experienced it, but just from, thinking there's many other athletes there on scholarship, and there's many, many more athletes there compared to a school here in Ireland. So the coach and the different kind of background staff do need to direct their attention to everybody. So a lot of the time you could possibly just be on your own, dealing with things on your own. So I'd say that definitely is a very tough and challenging experience. But you know you did mention, that it definitely was a great experience. And do you kind of want to elaborate a bit on that? Because in a way, with the injury and all, some people might be thinking like, how would it be good? You're injured, you're away from home. Like, that doesn't sound very, very pleasing at all. But kind of, in what way was it a good experience? Was it a good experience to find out that America wasn't for you? Did you kind of gain some fitness in running? Did you gain some intelligence in terms of running? How was it a good experience? And you know do you do you kind of regret it, or are you, as pleased as you could be to have that experience in the first place?
I think if I could go back, I'd still do it again, because I learned a lot about myself, about the dedication it takes to really make it to that top level. And I was just immersed in this whole new culture, and it was so cool. It's like the movies, like it really is like the cheerleaders and, the football games and all of that, seeing all of that, like the fraternities, the sororities, and seeing like American college and living American college life was so cool. And like the places, I think we went to like LA, we went to such cool places, even getting to visit all those places. And I mean, yeah, like overall it was so cool. It was just like, as I said, it was a bit clouded by the whole injury, but even like things like school, like the I loved going to college, I loved my classes. And you even have like the way the athletes are treated there is like insane. So you have a tutor, like if you're stuck in any of your modules, you have a tutor that will help you, that's assigned to you, that will help you. And it's basically kind of like grinds. um and you get like, there's a lot of perks to being an athlete, like, like things like that. You go down to the athlete center, which in Arkansas was like near the football stadium, massive. Like, that was one thing I loved about America. I was seeing all the facilities that like all the different sports have. And like the football stadium was just the coolest thing, the track, everything. But yeah, like we got so much help with our schoolwork. And definitely I would say the system in America, the college system, is a lot easier than in Ireland. I got such a land when I arrived back into Mary I to do teaching compared to America. I mean, it was really enjoyable in America. You can actually do like really cool modules, just really random modules like for the first year, whereas that's like not the case in Ireland. And just like I did meet so many cool people. You know, yeah, like it was competitive at times, and you had your bitchiness, like I suppose any big massive group of girls would have, but I made such cool memories, and I got to meet so many people and just experience like a part of America that I never would have, I suppose. Um, but yeah, I mean, I honestly, if anyone ever asks me like, oh, should I go to America? I say 100%, because if you don't like it, you can come home. I came home after I finished the freshman year, and then I said that no, like I can't go back. But like you could also go there and have the best experience of your life and really push on. Like, look at Shifra over there now with the professional group. Like, like it really does work out for some people. But I think it's also important to address that, like, there are two sides to America. You always see the ones that go really well and they just fly through it. But like you also have the people who unfortunately don't have that good of an experience. But like even still, knowing that I had that bad experience, I would always go back and do it again, because I think I learned so much and it really stood to me. I remember like I got into really good shape at one point. It was just before I got injured actually. And the confidence I had, I came home at Christmas for the Christmas break, and like I remember the group I was training with, like I was so focused and they were off doing this or like chatting away, and I was like, no, I was so serious. I wanted to get my stuff done. So I remember being like so proud of myself. And then unfortunately the injury came, but like I was in a really good mindset, and sure, of course I was, because I was surrounded by these incredibly talented people, and that like the whole group aspect like really rubbed off me, I think, and really made me realize, okay, like I can be really good at running, and this is great and I do really love this. But then unfortunately the injury did cloud it, but I still think that all of the good times and the good training stood to me as I got older then.
Yeah, definitely 100%. And even having those little blocks of training in between injuries over in America would definitely will pay off and has paid off for you. And you were saying the fact that like you would definitely do the whole experience again. I suppose getting to go over to America and eat pizza for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and visit LA. There's no reason why you wouldn't do it again. It sounds like the time of the life. So no, overall as an experience, it definitely does sound really good. But in terms of running, which is maybe your main focus and the whole scholarship's main focus, yeah, maybe it was in some ways not the greatest, but then in some ways as well it was really really good for you. So no, again, not shaming American colleges or anything in terms of pressure or anything. It For some people, it definitely could be a life changing experience for both inside and outside of running. But unfortunately, for you, it wasn't for you. So no, that was really really good to hear. Um, Kind of coming back now into Ireland. We'll land back into Ireland, and you were telling me that you were initially coached by your cousin for a while, and then now you're being coached by Joe Ryan. So kind of the whole experience of being coached by your cousin, because I know some people get coached by parents like moms and dads, and it kind of brings the whole running thing into the family dynamic. Was there any ever case of that, or was it, did she really really help you with your running, and was it always kind of good vibes inside and outside of running?
Yeah, so it was always good vibes. So Anne O'Mara and Frank O'Mara are brother and sister. So they're my cousins. And like even having Frank's expertise, like, a former world champion, was amazing. And I think I always admired him, and I was always in awe of what he did. And I loved getting advice from him, and like knowing what he had accomplished. Like I always thought that was so cool. Still think that's so cool. And Anne was so good to me, like always, she always listened to me, and I was always felt so comfortable telling her, like, okay, like with what I feel good with and what I didn't feel good with. And I suppose like I just got home when I got home and was training away. eventually it kind of got to the point where I was training with people who were younger than me, and I needed to be with more experienced people. And that was when I realized, okay, like if I want to push on here and if I want to move up another level, I need to make that change. And I had the conversation with Anne, and she was like delighted, and she was like, I'm so happy you said that, because you do need that. That's exactly what you need. So she was all for it, and we're still so close to this day. Like I'll still ring her after my races, and we'll still meet up and have chats and stuff. But which is obviously really nice, that we still have that really great relationship. But it's gas, because I'd always said if I was ever going to change coach, that like this when I was younger, if I was ever going to move coach, that I would go to Joe, because all through like my juvenile years and stuff, like sometimes you'll notice that when you're like relevant or when you're running well, people will be all about you, but when you're injured and things aren't going great, not so much. And I remember like maybe in the times where I was just like running shit and I was racing slow, like no matter if it was good or bad, Joe would always come up to me and be like, how was that, like how was your race? And he was just like, I really thought that he cared about the person and not like the athlete. And he'd always check how you were doing and stuff. So like there was never any question of me going to anyone else. Like I always knew that if I was ever going to move coach, that I'd move to Joe.
Yeah, definitely. And you kind of, what way did Joe? I know he has, maybe a bit more expertise than you're running earlier on. But in what way did Joe kind of enhance your running, maybe, and really allow you to get to that next level?
Yeah, I think Joe was very patient with me, and he listened to everything I had to say. He listened to my goals, and I just trusted in his training completely. And like one thing that I love with Joe is that like I suppose when I was younger, I might have tried to push my easy runs, and like looking back now, I suppose I was never really fully recovering because I was doing everything like a little bit hard. Like I
Yeah.
was trying to push my easy runs, and the minute I went to Joe, like that stopped. Like easy runs easy, hard things hard. So that was, I suppose, a big change for me, but it really seemed to pay off. And yeah, like the training is just all monitored, it's all controlled, and it's very much like if I'm feeling shit, and like if Joe's at a session, I'm feeling shit, it's pull back straight away. There's no like let's push through this. Like he listens to all of us, and he knows our bodies, and he'd even know looking at me running, he'd be like, what's wrong, like what's up, so it's very controlled, and it's very enjoyable. And I think like I knew going to Joe that I was ready to push on, and I trust Joe with my life, like honestly. And we've a great relationship, and we've a great dynamic, and like it's gas, because even when like if I'd be away training with the girls, and like myself and Rose, like she'd be one of my best friends, she also is coached by Joe, and like we'd be on the phone to Joe like screaming, laughing down the phone, and the girls would be like, oh, like you've such a great relationship. And we do, like we're so close with him, and I think like that also really helps our running, being really close, and just being able to ring him and say, hey, like this is sore, that's sore, like look, I have this going on, whether it's like Joe, I'd even ring him like if there's something going on like with a boy or something, like that affects your running. So like, but I'd be telling Joe the whole scenario, so it's just things like that. And we've a great relationship, and like he knows what I want to do, and like I completely trust his training to get me there, like.
Yeah, 100%. And in terms of his training to getting you there, that did really show and really paid off in 2020. I know this year so far we hadn't had much opportunity at all to race, and obviously last year there wasn't much opportunity at all, but kind of when you did get the opportunity, you definitely did not hold back, and that was shown in the All Ireland 1500 meters in Santry in 2020, winning your first ever outdoor senior All Ireland. I remember you telling me that you got a good few seconds, a good few thirds, and a few fourths in there. So it was you're always kind of pushing that podium anyway, but always kind of nearly touching that winning medal. And I was listening to the Pushing Limits podcast with you and Shane Finn there on one of my runs last week, and from what I heard of that episode there, your lead up in terms of the night before to that session was definitely far from ideal. So maybe for people listening at home who maybe haven't got around to listen to that episode with Shane Finn, do you want to kind of give us a bit of a background the night before in particular of the lead up to your 1500 meter win?
Yeah. So first of all, after the heat, I got pulled for drug testing, and like even that threw me off because like after the race, I was like, okay, I'll have my dinner at this time, and I'll have my shower at this time, and I'll go to bed at this time. And then normally, like from other experiences, I had been drug tested after the final, so that never even like registered in my head that I'd be like tested after the heat. And so then I, of course, was like running around and like I couldn't pee, and then I had to keep running. I had to stay there until I was able to. And so I'd say it was dark out. Like they were gone. They were gone from the stadium, and I was still there jogging around the place, like downing the bottles of water, trying to go to the toilet. So that was the first thing, and I was like, oh, this is just annoying. And then that night, yeah, everything was grand. We were staying up at the top of the Metro Hotel up the road, like the big tall one. We were up at the very top, and that was grand. Went to bed, grand, ready for tomorrow. And at like 4 or 5 in the morning, the fire alarm started going off, like screaming, and I was like, "Oh no, not any other day, just not today." So then we were on like the top floor, like down 30 flights of stairs, down there for an hour, like 5 in the morning. Alarm, they couldn't get it off, like whatever was good, they just couldn't. There was like a malfunction in the system or whatever. We couldn't turn off the alarm, so I was just like trying not to freak out because I was like, oh my God, I literally have to run today in the nationals. And then back up the stairs, back up 30 flights of stairs because the lifts were out of order because it was obviously a fire alarm.
Yeah.
And then yeah, I got back up and I was like, okay, what do I do now? I was like having hot chocolate, and then I was like, I remember texting Joe, and I was like, Joe, oh my God, like listen to what just happened. And then yeah, I was just like, I got up the next day, and I was like, okay, like that was not the most ideal preparation, but it was so gas because I felt unreal in that race. Like I was like, maybe I need to trek up a few stairs for a race because I felt so good. Like it's mad.
Yeah, no, definitely, definitely, far from ideal. And even the night before a race, never mind an All Ireland, or yeah, All Ireland final, in terms of running, the next day, you have the butterflies in your stomach. You're kind of thinking about the race that night. You might have a little dream about the race, and it's all that's going through your head. And then to that come along to then mess up things even more is definitely, as I mentioned, far from ideal. But then obviously, as we know, you went on to get the win, and you mentioned that you felt really good during the race. So do you kind of want to talk us through a little bit of the race? I remember watching it, and it definitely was a really good race. And it was even without fans and without many people in the stadium. The All Irelands in general never they always tend to be entertaining. And the women's senior 1500 meter was definitely no different. So yeah, as you mentioned, you felt really good. So do you kind of just want to give us a bit of a breakdown of the race?
Yeah, well, I mean, I going into that final, I was like, I want to win this race so bad. Like, I want this title. If it's going to be any year, I knew going into it, that was my chance. Like, that was my shot. I knew that like Michelle, Isolt, and Ellie would like really, really put it up to me, and I knew that like between the four of us, like it was like whoever had it that day, like whoever wanted it the most was going to get it.
Yeah.
And yeah, so we started off, to be honest, I had like no idea how the race was going to pan out. What I thought was going to happen was that like Michelle or Isol would make like a big move in the middle of the race to really kind of throw it off. But Michelle and Isol kind of went to the front, and they took it out in like 68, which is like, that's just, I love running at that pace. So I was like, I just slotted into third. And it was quite a windy day, actually. It was really windy, so I was quite conscious of that, and I was like, no, I need to play my cards right here. I don't need to ever be in the lead until crossing the line. So yeah, the first lap, it was, to be honest, like it was just such a nice race. It was like sometimes in national seniors, like the year before, it was really slow and tactical. So in those scenarios, it's just not enjoyable because you're jogging and you're trying to watch what everyone else is doing, whereas the girls got this one out and got this one moving. So there was no time for that. And I also knew that because we went out hard, it would string it out pretty quickly. So yeah, we were going at a solid pace, through 400 grand, through 800 great, felt really good. And I was like, oh my God, like I feel really good today. Then we got to 300 meters to go. And I remember I was holding back, like I wanted to move, I wanted to go, but I was just like, no, you have to be patient, because it's really easy in championship running to just go like without thinking, but you have to just use your head. And I knew that, I needed to hold back. I needed to wait to make that move. And when I made that move, I needed to go. So then with like 250 to go, Isolt made a move, and then I just went with her, set on her shoulder, and kind of coming around the bend, I just felt really, really strong. And I was like, okay, Amy, this is your chance. I was like, you have to go, and you have to go like you've never gone before. And I just sprinted for my life. And yeah, it was just the best feeling ever. It's just such relief. Like when I won, it was definitely a bit crazy because it was an empty stadium. So I was like,
Yeah.
yay. And then there was no one there. But it was still amazing, like, to win it.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I'd say, as you mentioned, it would have been maybe a little bit awkward in a way, kind of celebrating, kind of screaming to yourself, and then kind of just hearing the echo coming off from the stand, and then, uh, but 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 no, it definitely would still be in an amazing feeling with or without fans, and no, it kind of turned out to kind of play in your favor in terms of, you mentioned, it was your kind of race, kind of going out a little bit fast. You didn't have to be thinking about who kind of jostling for positions. It was kind of it was definitely, kind of to hang on from the start. I know you were mentioning you were feeling good that day. Was it you Izzult and a few other athletes up in the main pack from the start, or was it quite close in your kind of from your perspective during the race, or did you kind of think, right, I'm definitely getting on the podium? Did you kind of have an idea halfway through the race, or kind of what was going through your mind?
Yeah, so I think for me going into that race, like when I was talking to Joe before it, I was like, as long as there's no bumps and barges or there's no hiccups, like if I'm there, if I'm with that lead group with 200 meters to go, I can win. Like I can win this race, and I should win this race. If I'm thereabouts with 200 to go, I knew that just on PBs and on current form that it was my race to win. So yeah, I think like once I got myself into the right position, and do you know what? Actually, I was a bit boxed in for some of it, and that was a bit. I remember with like a lap to go. I think like Michelle was right in front of me. Izzot was outside her. I was right behind Michelle, so I was in second on the inside, but Ellie was right outside me, and I was like, shit, like I'm boxed in. And even though that's when I felt like I was like getting a bit panicky, and I was like, no, don't even panic. And that was the first time I think I was just like, no, like I just needed to trust that I just needed to get around, and as it panned out and just really worked well. But I think it was like some people there might have panicked and been like, shit, like what will I do? Like I need to get out because I was boxed in. Um, but I just knew that if I just stuck there and let no gaps, that I would be thereabouts anyway.
Yeah, definitely. And during the course of the race, you were telling me that you were you were getting a few, seconds, a few thirds, a few fourths, and a few years leading up to this. But was that kind of going through your mind? Whereas, like, did that kind of play into the fact that you were being so calm and maybe a bit more tense situations? You were thinking about those previous times, like where you didn't get the win. You were like, right, I can't do anything stupid here. This is the year I'm going out to get it. Or were you kind of just completely focused on the race you were in?
Yeah, I think like at that time I was completely focused, and but I feel like I learned a lot because there was definitely a lot of national senior champs that I made mistakes in, that I like there was a good few fourths where I was distraught coming off the track. I think it was the 2020 indoors. I made a mess of the 1500. Like I had hoped to retain my title, and tactically I was just off the mark. And if you're in a national, it was a slow tactical race, and one mistake like that and it's gone. And I was third in that, and I was livid. I was really angry at the way I ran in that race. So I felt like I needed redemption and I needed to get that title. So it was definitely the most kind of inspired and driven and like motivated I was to win a title. And I knew like I want this I want this the most today, and it paid off then in the race.
Definitely did pay off. Yeah, definitely a really great experience, and hopefully a lot more to come. Obviously a few restrictions are being lifted over the course of this month and next month, so hopefully we'll have more the same this year in terms of All Ireland outdoor track. I know there hasn't been many races, and it's the same with even professional level. There hasn't been many races, so the one race people do get, even the start of this year, there was being records broken left, right, and centre, just because no one knows where anyone really is in terms of fitness. Everyone been kind of keeping it quiet to themselves and just getting the work done. So hopefully we can see more of that. Hopefully this year again in Santry in the outdoors.
Yeah. Oh, I think like hopefully nationals will go ahead. I know the restrictions seem to be pushed out more and more, but like it's going to be the same as indoors. I think everyone knows like, okay, I've put in all this work, and in other years before COVID, you would have had your pick at any races, whereas now it's like every single race is like the last race of the season because there's so little opportunity that you want to go out and run your very best in every race, and you're not taking any opportunity for granted. So I think the summer, hopefully we'll get a lot of races, but I think the summer will be great because everyone's just ready to rock. Like, I mean, sure, we've been cooked up for over a year now, and I think everyone is just training away, tipping away, and really wants to get out and show what they're capable of.
Yeah, definitely. Fingers crossed, fingers crossed. The last point before we wrap this episode up, Amy, is, as I mentioned, you're the third female I've had on the podcast, and out of three, I actually, Israel actually gave me the idea to kind of bring this up in a way. As I mentioned, I don't know if it's controversial in a way, but maybe a bit debatable. But I feel like it is a really good topic to be aware of, and especially as a big international, and probably an idol to many young female athletes and male athletes across Ireland. And that topic is, women in sport. I'm not sure personally if you've ever kind of, I don't know, suffered, if even if that's in the right word, if that's the right word, and in kind of maybe some sort of discrimination or exclusion in terms of sport, in terms of being a woman, or just kind of your general overview of the whole situation as a whole, as I mentioned. So kind of just young girls and more girls to just get involved and to stay in sports. What's kind of your perspective in a way on that, where you can kind of bring more girls into sport and keep more girls in sport?
Yeah. Well, the first thing I would say about that is that I think in athletics we are so lucky because I think when you look at sports like maybe rugby, soccer, there just simply isn't the same coverage for men's sport and women's for like we'll say rugby for example. Like when you think of rugby, you think of men's rugby because there's just not as much coverage for the women, and that's just not fair. Whereas I think in athletics we're very lucky that it's equal. And I think from all the way up, like in any experience I've ever had, it's equal coverage for men and women. And as I said, like I know other sports aren't it's not, that's just simply not the case. But I do think that there's been a massive shift now in the last few years, and they're really pushing to get more coverage for women, and that's great. And yeah, I think like social media is obviously a big help now, where girls maybe a few years ago before social media wouldn't have had the chance to see people they look up to. They wouldn't have had the chance to see their daily life and stuff. But I think now through social media, we have that platform. Like I know I have a platform where I can help younger athletes and maybe give them advice and say like, listen, I did this and it didn't work, so avoid that. But I think for girls that are maybe losing interest or just with COVID and stuff, like I know that must be so hard, because I know if I was young, if I was maybe 16, 17 for COVID, they're such important years for development, and not just development in running, but like social development. Like you make so many friends through running, and you have so much fun through your sport, and like that's just gone now. And I mean, hopefully it'll be back this summer, but it's been a long time, and even for my age as well, but especially if you're younger. But I mean, I would say sport it's never straightforward. It's always up and down and up and down. And I think if you at a young age understand that, that there is going to be the highest of highs, but there's also going to be the lowest of lows, that I think it might make it easier to stick with it until you reach your senior level. And another thing is that like it's quite common for people not to reach their potential until they're senior. Like I race a lot of people who didn't run for Ireland for the very first time until they were senior level, you know. And it's just those people that just grind, grind, grind and stick with it, especially through the hard times. Because I mean, that's when people give in, is through the hard times, and they're just like, you know what, couldn't be arsed doing this. But I think if you can just stick in through the hard times and actually expect and welcome, it's going to be hard, and there are going to be the ups and downs, the ins and outs, that it'll really kind of make you stick with it. Because even with social media, it's really easy to like just show the good bits, and people never post like, I mean, I remember there in the indoors when I had a really bad run where I was hoping to qualify for the Europeans, and like I was distraught, but like I didn't go posting that picture of me like
Yeah.
screaming, crying after. So I mean, we do tend to only show the best bits, but the reality is that it's very much up and down, and that there's rarely, I mean, the good days and the days that we post about, they're not as often as you would think, and a lot of it is just kind of mediocre days, up days, down days. But I think if you can just stick with it and know and expect those all of the days, that it'll make your choice a lot easier to stick with it through senior level then.
Yeah, no, definitely, and I liked what you mentioned there in terms of the coverage, because there be young athletes, male or female, but just in terms of female at the moment, who are going through sport, and they're training every day, and working really hard, but then if they're not seeing women on a professional stage achieve the things they want to achieve, they kind of then start to lose a bit of motivation, start to think then maybe like, okay, well, if no one else is doing it, why would I be able to do it? And especially athletics in a way is definitely coming up through the ranks, and definitely is becoming a bigger sport, but as you mentioned, like soccer and rugby, that are already really, really big sports and don't get the coverage that women do think they should get and should definitely get, kind of does play into the fact that a lot of young women do end up dropping out, because they're looking at football every day, and it's men rugby, it's men. They never see anyone kind of cheering for the women's side, and they're like, well, if we're not getting the attention, what's the point to getting there in the first place? So what ways you kind of see the progression of coverage going in terms of women's sports, and how do you think it can be improved down the line?
Yeah, I think like that even that 20 by 20 campaign when that was going on, I think that was brilliant. There's Her Sport. I'm actually an ambassador for Her Sport, which have done so much for women in sport, and they showcase girls in all sports, and especially minority sports. And I feel like I'd be like, they do you know takeovers on social media.
Yeah.
I think like one thing that I think is like, I find it really interesting seeing an athlete not just for like their name, but seeing like their personality. And I think that if there was more of that pushed out, and more like actually getting to know the runners and getting to know them, like not just as the athlete, but like at them as a person, that they might see, oh, you know what, they're just like every normal person, and they go through the ups and downs. So I think even more coverage of, because even there is so much male coverage out there, and you would know the male personalities because there is so much. Whereas if that was pushed more in the female side, then more females would be like, oh, I mean, they just do the normal day in day out things, and they're getting to that level, I can do that too. So I think more like getting to know the actual personality of the athlete rather than just seeing them as like results, I think.
Yeah, yeah, definitely 100%. And the fact that seeing them as results, and the fact that you're not seeing many women results, is definitely again kind of degrading to some athletes out there. So seeing their life, and seeing the fact that they go through the exact same thing that many other women do be going through, is kind of refreshing for them in a way, to see that they can get to a level where they can make maybe a living, a profession, or just keep up the hobby and keep in the sport and keep fit. So that obviously, like the 2020 campaign, is kind of the main goal, because there is only quite a minority of people that do get to the highest level. So even just trying to keep women and girls in sport at a young age is always a really, really good thing to do, physically and obviously mentally. And as well, kind of, has there been times where obviously, you know, kind of not times specifically, but ways you've seen, you know, over maybe the course of you running, you know, in dancing or just in sport in general, seeing kind of the, I don't want to say like discrimination, to exclusion maybe of women or young girls in sport. Have you ever kind of witnessed examples of that?
No, I the only thing I've seen, I suppose, is just the lack of visibility, especially with the team sports. I mean, honestly, with running, I have to say it's been very equal all the way up. I really think that the women get just as much coverage as the men. It's sports like athletics. I suppose tennis would be another one, maybe swimming, where the women actually get the same coverage and same visibility, and the women's stars in those sports are just as well known as the men. Whereas, like, I would find, if you asked me to name a good women's soccer player or a good women's rugby player, I would struggle because I don't see them. Whereas I see the top men's ones everywhere, on the newspaper, on social media, on TV. So yeah, I would say, like, the discrimination would be that for a lot of those team sports, they just simply don't get enough visibility. Same with the GAA, like, even the girls in GAA wouldn't get half as much visibility as the fellas would. So I think that's the main thing that needs to be changed, because the more we see them, then the more interested you'll become in them, and the more kind of you'll know about their lives and their personalities. So yeah, I'd say the coverage really would be the only thing that I would ever have seen.
Yeah, definitely, and you know, that's obviously good. That's kind of shown in a way, that is, in a sense, in terms of the whole exclusion part, is slightly in terms of sport coming to an end from what you and I have seen. But there definitely is still a good bit of work that you and a lot of influencers and organizations are doing behind the scenes to kind of improve that. So yeah, that is really really good to see, and hopefully in the future, you know, because it is quite, you know, awkward in a way, and sad to see when you go to a women's match and there's not many people there at all, you know. Realistically, in a perfect world, both the men and female, you know, should be getting the same attention. You should be supporting kind of your country in any way you can, but obviously at the moment that's not the way it is. But hopefully, you know, in the future that can all change.
Yeah, exactly. And, like, even when you look at, the Irish women's hockey team, I mean, when they were second in the world, like, the amount of hype that was behind them, and when they were doing well, and it just goes to show how, like, Ireland are so competitive at the top level. It's just there needs to be more visibility, and I really do think that we're going in the right direction, and, just have to be a bit patient. But I think even give it another few years, and hopefully it'll be a lot more of a level playing field.
Definitely, fingers crossed. Yeah, no, Amy, look, this was a really, really great episode of the podcast. I really, really enjoyed having you on. The hour and 15 minutes does really fly when you're having a great conversation. And yeah, I appreciate you taking the time out and coming on. I really did enjoy it.
Yeah, no, it was great to chat about, like, the whole ups and downs and ins and outs. So yeah, thank you so much for having me.
No problem at all. And possibly in the future, and if you retain your title this year, we could very well be seeing you back on the podcast very soon.
Yeah, hopefully, fingers crossed.
Exactly. So for anyone watching or listening at home, I appreciate everyone, and I'll see y'all next time. Bye.